Hello and welcome all. We're going to get started here on time as some folks continue to join us. I want to welcome everyone for being with us this evening. Special thanks to Dan Brown for joining us tonight. We're so excited to have you here with us. We have folks signed up from Baghdad to India to Hawaii to all over New England. So it's very exciting for us to have you all with us this evening. So I'm Erica Nichols Fraser with the Children's Literacy Foundation. I'm going to start us off by just telling you a little bit about the work that we do. Then I'll introduce Dan Brown. He'll speak for a few minutes, and then we'll open it up to discussion and questions, which I'm sure you all have many questions for Dan. So just to start us off, a few housekeeping rules. Please keep yourself muted when you're not speaking. You can find that button at the bottom of your screen. If you want to see just the speaker, you can find the view button to see speaker view at the top right of your screen. When you have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat. I will monitor and try to keep up to date with the chat there. You may also choose to raise your hand, which you can do through the participants button at the bottom. I ask when you're done speaking, you do take your hand down so we don't think you're still calling on us. And that should do it kind of for the nitty-gritty details. So first of all, I just wanted to let you know a little bit about what the Children's Literacy Foundation does. We are a nonprofit based in Waterbury Center, Vermont. We're called the Children's Literacy Foundation, or CLIF, as we like to call ourselves. We have been in operation since 1998, and since then we've served over 300,000 children and given away more than $8 million in books. Our mission is to inspire a love of reading and writing among low-income, at-risk, and rural kids in Vermont and New Hampshire. We do that through a number of ways. So we have some different programs, all of which involve storytelling by our amazing authors, illustrators, poets, graphic novelists, and storytellers that we work with from throughout Vermont and New Hampshire. In a normal year, we'd be sending those folks out to schools and libraries and after-school programs, homeless shelters, affordable housing units, lots of places where kids spend time. This year, our visits are mostly virtual. We've been able to do some outdoor as well, though not right now. It's a little chilly here in Vermont for that, but we have been doing virtual storytelling weekly. We will be resuming our virtual storytelling series in early March, so do check our website for that. And, since the pandemic, we've been doing this adult book club as well. Many of our presenters write books for adults too. So we're trying to also highlight that work, and we're very glad to have you all here. A few of our grants are currently open. So our Year of the Book grant, which is our big $25,000 grant we give to elementary schools in Vermont and New Hampshire, that application is due on March 10th and can be found on our website under our programs tab under Year of the Book. So that program gives a number of author visits to schools, as well as special literacy themed programs. We have one school currently who's doing an amazing race literary program, which is very exciting. So fun, creative programs around literacy, new books for each classroom and the school library, new books for the local school public library, as well as 10 new books for each child in the school. So that is our Year of the Book grant, and folks can find that application on our website. Our Summer Readers grant is also open, available now on our website under the Summer Readers tab. Those applications will be available until June 1st, but we do encourage folks working in Vermont and New Hampshire with low income, at-risk, and rural kids to apply for that, sooner than later. We encourage early applications. So those are our current applications that are open. I do have the link to our website there in the chat. We are entirely community supported. So if you want to support the work that we do, you can go to our website and make a donation. We very much appreciate that. So that's a little bit about CLIF. Now I am going to welcome our guest today, Dan Brown. I'm very excited about this. I'm sure many of you are as well. Dan Brown is the author of numerous #1 best-selling novels, including, of course, The Da Vinci Code, which has become one of the best-selling novels of all time, as well as the subject of intellectual debate among readers and scholars. Brown's novels are published in 56 languages around the world, with over 200 million copies in print. In 2005, Brown was named one of the most influential people in the world by Time magazine, whose editors credited him with keeping the publishing industry afloat, renewed interest in Leonardo da Vinci and early Christian history, spiking tourism to Paris and Rome, a growing membership in secret societies, the ire of cardinals in Rome, 8 books denying the claims of the novel, and 7 guides to read along with it, a flood of historical thrillers, and a major motion picture franchise. The son of a mathematics teacher and a church organist, Brown was raised on a prep school campus where he developed a fascination with the paradoxical interplay between science and religion. These themes eventually formed the backdrop for his books. He is a graduate of Amherst College and Phillips Exeter Academy, where he later returned to teach English before focusing his attention full-time to writing. He lives in New England with his yellow lab, Winston. And I'm sure those of you who have read Origin recognize the name Winston and how that comes into play in the book. But Dan, I would love you to speak. And one thing I know many of our readers are probably wondering, we think Dan Brown, we think thrillers, right? We don't think children's books, right? So why did you choose to write a children's book, and what was the inspiration behind that?
It's kind of a crazy story. First, I want to say thank you for that. That was quite an introduction. Thank you. And also thank you for the work that you do. When I was a kid, there was nothing that was more exciting to me than a trip to the library or the bookmobile. And to know that the kids of all income brackets can enjoy books is absolutely critical to our culture and to our society. And I just appreciate the work you do. So thank you. It is true. I am probably better known, at least for writing books for adults. I recently wrote a book for kids, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But then I'm sure we can talk about adult things too. When I was a little kid, my dad was both of my parents were teachers. My dad was a mathematics teacher. My mom was a piano teacher, and they did not want us to have a TV growing up. So as a kid, I had no TV. They wanted us to read books and play music, which is exactly what we did. And so some of my fondest childhood memories were just sitting on the living room floor, reading Dr. Seuss or Richard Scarry or Maurice Sendak, and listening to my mom's classical music collection. So she was a professional classical musician, and I didn't have a radio. We didn't have a TV. All I had was this record collection. And until a fairly old age, I had no idea there was anything other than classical music. So I grew up with a great love of classical music. And those fond childhood memories of reading a picture book and listening to classical music were so influential for me that I wanted to recreate that experience for kids today. And so I wrote a book called Wild Symphony, which is poetry sort of in the vein of Dr. Seuss, light and silly and playful words. And each poem is about an animal. And each animal has a little moral to teach the child, or in some cases, the parent. And along with each poem is a piece of classical music that, as I said, I grew up playing piano. I've been writing music my whole life. So I composed little pieces of classical music to go with each animal. And so it's been really gratifying and a lot of fun to see what kids are doing with this, bouncing around like kangaroos to detuned timpanis, or flying like manta rays, or darting around like bats, depending on the piece of music in the poem. So that's been a whole lot of fun. Not to fear, I am back in the middle of a Robert Langdon thriller right now. I'm working hard on it now and hope to deliver it before the end of the year. And that's sort of what I'm up to. And I should say that it's good we're doing this virtually, because I don't think any one of us has a living room big enough for this particular book.
Yes, we're so excited to have so many people with us, and people continue to join. So thank you, Dan. I know many folks read the latest edition in the Robert Langdon series, Origin, and I had a few questions I'd like to pose to the group, and maybe we can turn to you, Dan, to weigh in. But one thing I wanted to talk about was architecture and the role of architecture in this book. It felt so sort of endemic and important to the novel itself, you know, the spaces that we were in, these beautiful and well-described places. I was wondering if anyone else had thoughts about the role that architecture played in this or your other books, you know, that is somewhat familiar. And then I wanted to hear from you, Dan, you know, how that inspires you and kind of how that come to be such a big part of these novels. Did anyone have thoughts on that? Do we have hands raised? Perhaps no. Oh, I see one. Who is this? One moment as I. Okay. Oh, here we go. Katya. Katya wants to weigh in. Hi, Katya.
Hey, hi Dan. So nice to meet you, whatever. I have to say, I so appreciate the wonderful visual detail, especially of the architectural spaces. I was an architecture major in college. So it's just so you just get to transport yourself to the place, and it makes it, you know, it just rounds out the whole experience of reading the book, because it's not just about the person, it's also about the place. And so I've just really enjoyed that.
I'm glad. It's such fun to write about great pieces of architecture. I actually wanted to be an architect, but I had no artistic ability whatsoever. And at that point, you know, we didn't have CAD programs. You actually had to be able to draw a straight line. And I've always appreciated architecture, and I forget what architect said it, but he described it as architecture is music in its solid form, and that's always the way I think of architecture. And you know, whether it's a piece of architecture or a location, I really feel like location is a character in a book. If you draw it correctly, a conversation that is had in a little restaurant might not be as interesting as a conversation being had just walking through the Tuileries Gardens or walking through the, you know, Place Napoleon or whatever it is, whatever place happens to be exciting to you. So I try to set as much of these novels as possible in fascinating places. So thanks for noticing.
Absolutely do. I have a couple of our folks who want to weigh in here. We have Jeremy, and then we'll go to you, Heidi. Let's see, Jeremy, are you?
Hi, how you doing? Is
Hi.
that working?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. Yeah, reading your books, Dan, I'm sitting with it right now, trying to cram the last couple pages in as we do this meeting. I've always loved the detail you put in your locations and explaining it, and it really helps draw you into kind of the surrounding and living through the story. And you know, I've wondered, have you visited these places, or is this through other research that you've found these places and described them through that?
Every single place I have written about, I have visited in person, except two. One of them was a Turkish prison, which I decided not to visit. And I also wrote a book called Deception Point, which was set in the Arctic Circle.
Yes.
And I decided that talking to glaciologists and reading a lot was adequate.
Fair enough. We have Heidi here who wanted to say something on that as well.
Oh, hi, Dan. I always feel like I'm really in the space. Like I cannot do audio books of yours. I have to be reading it. I have to be absorbed in it. And I feel like I'm really in the space, and you know, my heart starts palpitating at the exciting moments, and like the spiral staircase, and I was like, oh my God, like as he flings across the whole staircase. And when your description at the end, when Langdon is in the church watching the lights from the stained glass windows dancing and moving, and it brought me right to when I visited the Washington Cathedral, because I felt that same feeling and just watching the lights dance. And it was just so incredibly beautiful. I love the way you write.
Well, thank you. It's very kind of you to say. Sagrada Familia makes it pretty easy to write. I mean, there's just, you could write a book just on that main sanctuary there is absolutely incredible. And it's funny that you would mention the spiral staircase. I'll just give you a little insight to how these books are written. The scene in I'm going to try to tell it in a way that doesn't ruin it for people, but the scene in Sagrada Familia, I had finished and moved on, and I'd been to Sagrada Familia twice before that. I was almost done the book and went back for another visit and saw this staircase for the first time and was permitted to climb it. And halfway up, I thought, somebody has to die in the staircase. I can't let that not happen. And realized that I had a better ending than the one I was writing. And decided, if you've read the book, you know what happens in there, but that's just the way that architecture often inspires plot. And it did in Angels and Demons too. That entire book came out of a walk through the Pasetto between the Vatican and Castle St. Angelo. I was permitted to walk through that tunnel, and I just realized that it was a fantastic setting for an escape from the Vatican. So that's our architecture as inspiration.
Wow, that's great. I was also wondering if folks have thoughts on the two main questions posed in the Book of Origin. So where do we come from and where are we going? I'm wondering first if anyone else has thoughts on those questions and their interpretations of them and how Edmund Kirsch interpreted them in the book. And then Dan, we'd like to turn to you and hear a little bit about, kind of where that came from. First, are there any folks, one moment, let me look through here and see if we have any comments. Let's see, do I have anyone? Would anyone like to speak to those major questions? If not, Dan, maybe you could tell us a little bit about kind of how those inspired you to write the book.
Well, I, in the past, have written primarily about where do we come from? What is the origin of our belief? Where, what is our religious history? It's very well worn. I'm very, very comfortable in history. And I wanted to push myself and write not about history, but about what's to come. And of course, there's this incredible Gauguin painting, where do we come from? Why are we here? Where are we going? And those really are the fundamental questions of our existence. And it's funny, after writing Inferno, which was essentially, a pandemic, rather ironically or coincidentally, I really wasn't sure what I could write that was on a bigger scale than sort of a global catastrophe like that. And I decided to tackle these big questions. The notion of where do we come from is something I've written about a lot. But this notion of where are we going to be in 50 years or even in 10 years was very interesting to me. I love technology. And I read a lot about artificial intelligence and ended up talking to a lot of specialists in the field of artificial intelligence who had different views of whether it was going to save us or destroy us. And I challenged one of them rather foolishly because he's a very, very bright man. And I sort of jokingly said, like, hey, I know you keep saying that artificial intelligence is dangerous. I don't really understand it because it seems to me that if we're writing the programs that are going to guide these machines, why can't we just write an underlying piece of code that says every single thing that you do, every decision you make has to be for the benefit of humankind, has to be in the favor of humankind. And this man sort of laughed and showed me how naive I was. He said, well, that's fine. We can do that until the computer analyzes the Earth's natural resources in our population and decides that this planet can't support 9 billion people, it can only support 4, and says, let me just take care of that for you. And I thought, okay, I've got a lot to learn. But it's a fascinating topic.
I agree. I fully agree. And I think this and all of your books tackle the influence of technology and science and art and religion in such, this sort of woven way. Jeremy, did you have another comment to make, or was that hand is still up?
Sorry, that hand's still up.
No worries. No worries. Just wanted to make sure.
All right, took care of that.
Oh, no problem. So we have a few questions. One question in the chat was, what's the title of the new book?
Well, even if I knew what the title was, I wouldn't be permitted to utter it out loud.
Fair enough.
I'm going to pretend I don't know. It's actually, I'm not pretending I don't know. I have many possible titles. I have not fallen on one yet. Sometimes I know on page one what I want to call it. And sometimes I finish the book and sit down with my editor and I have 4 or 5 ideas and we bounce them around and usually come up with idea number 6. So.
Fair enough. Heidi also wants to know, can you speak about your meetings with AI scientists in Palm Springs and how exciting it must have been to hear what they were working on and what they envision for the future? Was it a convention of sorts or just a meeting of minds?
Wow, well, I'm not sure how she knows that I was in Palm Springs talking to AI people. That is, maybe she was there. Anyway, that's this was an absolutely, or maybe I've spoken about it, I don't remember, but this was an absolutely fascinating meeting hosted by Jeff Bezos that brought in just top people in the field of robotics and artificial intelligence and a number of other fields. And it was such a hands-on experience to be. I'll just give you a couple examples. We had, they were talking about how the development of sensors, these little machines that can measure, basically, has just changed, for example, automotive industry. So they said, we decided we wanted to use AI to build a more efficient chassis for a car, a stronger chassis for a car. And so what we did is we just put sensors on every single part of the interior parts of a car, drove it around, and then just gave it to the computer. And the computer said, oh, your axle doesn't need to be that heavy. The maximum stress you could possibly feel is this, so we're going to make that thinner. And this over here is too close to the, whatever it is. So they create a new chassis and they do it again. And they keep running it through like an evolution. I mean, just Darwinian process of running it through the machine and building it, running it through the machine. And so this guy gives this really exciting description of this process. And it said, and then we now have the chassis for this car and we have 3D printed it out of silicon or something. I'm not sure what they printed it out of. And here it is. And 4 guys walked it out and set it down. And it looked utterly organic. It did not look like it had been built by people. It looked like it had grown organically. It was like a spider web of different size branches of material. And they said this weighs 1/2 what our car chassis weigh today and is 3 times stronger. All because of fusing this Darwinian notion with artificial intelligence and the ability to actually take measurements instantly that would take evolution, a long time to figure out. So it was a great time. And Boston Robotics was there with, I can't remember what they call it. I think they call it the cheetah. It was a little, not that little, it weighed 700 pounds. It's a robot that looks sort of like a cheetah. It has 4 legs and they're hinged in the way that a dog or a cheetah might be hinged. And this thing can run really, really fast. And they put it on a treadmill, a big long treadmill, and got it running. And then they do things like throw boxes onto the treadmill, and this thing would jump over them. It would see them coming and jump over them. And it was kind of eerie. That was the first time that I'd been up close and personal to a robot that felt like it was thinking. Of course, it wasn't, but that certainly was the impression. So,
wow.
I'm not sure I answered your question, but it was a great time.
Very cool. I just wanted to make a comment we have from Kaylee here who says, just have to say I read Deception Point 11 times. It's one of my favorites of all time. So thank you, Kaylee.
Wow. It's funny. I wrote it 11 times.
That's great. And Rosie wants to know, after studying so much to write Origin, this is a little personal, what is your particular idea of God?
Wow. It's I'm not going to dodge this question, but let me just give you a little. So I was doing the Penguin lecture series. I was in New Delhi in this huge hall, and we just had this perfect night of Q&A, and it couldn't have gone better. And the host said, one more question, pointed to somebody, and they said, "What is your idea of God?" I just thought, oh, here we go. What a way to end. And I gave the most honest answer I can give, which is I really feel when I sense the divine or God or those spiritual moments when you feel connection, it is literally that. It is connection between human beings. That's where I sense God. The notion that we are having the same thoughts, breathing the same air, and that we are responsible for each other and we're interconnected with each other. For some reason, that's where I perceive it most. And I think perhaps because I've studied so much religion, that I feel it least in places like scripture. And I don't mean that with any disrespect. Just for me personally, I've spent so much time, I think, with scripture and ancient books about the stories that man has created about God, that for me personally, I don't sense it there. I sense it in the present moment of interacting with other people. So.
Oh, thank you for that. That's wonderful. And so Kristen says, your books clearly require a great deal of research. Can you speak to your research process and to how you take very complicated material and write about it in a way that is understandable and engaging to the average reader?
Well, I'm glad that's your experience, because that's exactly what I attempt to do. It's not always easy. For some reason, I've decided that each one of these books should be about something totally different. And so in writing, Angels and Demons, I had to know a lot about the Vatican and Bernini and antimatter. To write Inferno, I need to know a lot about vector viruses and Florence and a 13th century epic poem by Dante Alighieri. And for Origin, I had to learn a lot about AI. And these were topics that I did not know a lot about. So when I set out to write a book, I'm in many ways about to take a year or two class which is, of course, is done through reading and talking to specialists on whatever topic it is I'm going to write about. So really the first phase of the research project, once I've decided what I'm going to be writing about, is to gather enough information that I can talk relatively coherently to somebody who understands the material very, very well, that I won't be wasting their time or won't be embarrassing myself asking questions that are absolutely obvious. So there's that sort of phase of the education where let me get up to the point where I can at least have conversations about this and start to learn for real. And as anyone who's been a teacher knows, you really, in order to teach material and make it palatable to somebody who's hearing it for the first time, you really have to understand it pretty well, because you do have to break it down. I'm fortunate. My dad is a wonderful teacher. Actually won a presidential award in teaching many years ago, and he's always been a role model to me. And I've heard him lecture, I've heard him talk, and making things understandable and accessible is about making them fun. It's about making people care about whatever it is that you're talking about, because learning is enjoyable for all of us. And so that's I think the main goal that I try to do, that I try to accomplish, is to make these books fun, such that you want to turn the page, and when you get to the end, you realize, like, oh, I actually learned something along the way. And one of the greatest compliments I was ever paid was by a librarian who said, "You know what? I think of your books like my vegetables, but they taste like dessert." I thought, that's a pretty nice way to put it. So, I've always remembered that and try to put a lot of vegetables in a great tasting dessert.
Oh, well, I certainly think you've done that from my perspective. We have several questions here. So one woman says, all of the Robert Langdon novels I've read have explored the intersection and tension between science and theology. I'm curious if you've always been interested in this relationship.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I certainly have. I grew up in a very religious household. My mom was a church organist. I sang in the choir. I went to church camp. I was confirmed. I read the Bible. And I was, I would say I was a religious child. But I also had that science side from my dad and loved mathematics and loved science. And I remember I was probably 10 years old or so and went to the Boston Museum of Science and saw their whole exhibit on evolution and the Big Bang and all that. And I went to my priest and I said, hey, you're telling me about Adam and Eve and Genesis, but here's this other story about the Big Bang and evolution. And essentially I said, which story is true? And unfortunately, he said, nice boys don't ask that question. So that sort of started me on this very strange path that actually turned out to be fairly circular. I moved away from religion at a fairly young age in my teens and became very entrenched in science. Just loved, I studied cosmology, I studied physics, I studied mathematics, geology. I thought I would be a geology major. The further I got in science, as those of us who have studied science know, the mushier the ground starts to get, the further you go. You've got, numbers turn into imaginary numbers, and, there are uncertainty principles, and all of a sudden things start getting a little soggy. And the big questions turn out to be spiritual. And the questions that quantum physicists are now asking themselves are related to consciousness and in some, God, really. So you realize you've kind of come full circle. And what I finally came to accept is that science and religion are really just two different languages attempting to tell the same story. And that's how I've been able to justify them against each other.
I love that approach. Here I'm going to go ahead and allow BT to speak up here.
Yes. Hi, Dan. I'm a huge fan of all your writing and your books. And I just want to ask if does writing always come easy to you? And if not, what do you do to get in the zone?
I wish writing always came easily. It does not. I don't get writer's block, but I often will find that what I've written might not serve the story. I might have sort of gotten so caught up in the architecture of some random thing that I've written this section that really has no business in the book. Are you a writer?
Aspiring writer. I've been working on my first novel, and like to talk to other writers about writing.
Yeah, well, you know what? The good news is that the best cure for struggling at anything is practice. I mean, you're not going to be a great violinist or a great soccer player without doing a lot of it. And you're not going to be great on day one. And the best advice I can give any aspiring writer, because I use this advice daily, is to remind yourself that what you're writing is really just for you. At this point, what you're writing, you're the only one who's going to see it. So we all have this tendency to be incredibly hard on ourselves at the beginning. Well, you write a sentence, you look at it, you say, that can't possibly be my first sentence. Well, maybe it's just your first sentence for the first month that you're writing the book, and then you come up with a better one. But if you get so locked into making sure that everything's perfect at every step, you will really be crippled and won't be able to push on. Remember that your first draft is really just the pencil sketch beneath what's going to become your masterpiece. You're going to paint over it with something that's better than the first thing that goes on the page. So take it easy on yourself, be gentle with yourself, be kind, and realize that, worst case scenario is you have to rewrite some section of it. It's a very rewarding process when it goes right. I don't know any writers for whom it goes right all the time. I'm certainly not one of them. This is not an exaggeration. For every page in the Da Vinci Code that you read, I threw out 10 pages. Yeah, so I never get it right the first time. And my editor jokes and just says, like, I will write a section if there's a conversation between three people, I might write it three different ways from three different points of view.
Wow.
To figure out which feels better. I'll just give you one other hint. If you control your point of view and really write from a character's perspective, that will help you enormously. If you get out of omniscient narrator, where you know all things, and just focus inside. Just, you can pick a different character for every chapter. Just say, I'm telling this part of the story through this character's mind. That will really help you focus what you know and what lens you're looking at the scene through. I hope that's helpful.
Very, thank you.
I'm going to ask Jeremy to speak up here.
Yeah, Dan, kind of piggybacking on what BT was saying, sort of started as the writer's block, but I find the same problems I think she was starting to explain too. But I was curious, when you first started writing your novels, before Robert Langdon, and then it seems like you kind of find your niche with that. What was the process that you took to kind of get yourself situated in the whole world of publishing books? And I apologize if that's a little too broad of a question.
Well, no, I mean, all of us who write, we write because we want people to read it. And so it's a very common question. You say, look, I'm trying to get established such that people can read what I'm writing. It's an interesting process, and it's gotten much, I would say, better and easier in the last 10 years. So when I was first starting out, which was in the mid-1990s, I wrote a book called Digital Fortress. And it was my first attempt at a novel. I had actually wanted to be a musician and failed pretty miserably at that. And had always loved writing, studied creative writing in high school and college, and decided, and I had an idea for a novel. So I wrote this novel. And then my process was that I went to something called the Writer's Marketplace, which probably a lot of people here know about. It's just it's a book that comes out every year with all of the literary agents in it. And I wrote a cover letter to 10 or 15 agents that said, I've written a book, here's the general topic, the book is done, would you like to represent it? And I got a letter back from somebody who said, that sounds interesting, send it in. I did, and it was kind of funny. They called and said, I've got good news. The first editor I showed this to wants to buy it. And they said, they're going to pay you $10,000. And I just spent 2 years on the book, and I was so happy. I thought, this is incredible. I couldn't believe anybody would pay me for something I had enjoyed doing so much. Later, things, obviously, I found a readership. My first 3 books did not find a readership at all. And when I wrote the Da Vinci Code, I remember sitting down with the manuscript when it was done, and it was in galley form. It had not come out yet. And I sat down, I read it in one day. And I thought, okay, if this doesn't work, then I guess I shouldn't be a writer, because to me, this is the book that I would want to read. And sort of going to this point of how we get our process underway. When you are a creative person, I don't care if you're a writer or a chef or a musician, all you have to guide yourself is your personal taste. What do you like? You can't go chasing what other people like. You have to write what you like, and you have to create the souffle or the painting or the book that you personally like, and then you hope others share your taste. And that's what I had done with each one of these books. And I was starting to think that nobody shared my taste. And fortunately, with Da Vinci Code, that changed, and people went back and read Angels and Demons, the other books. And I've had people say, Digital Fortress is my favorite, or Angels and Demons is my favorite. So there is some patience to the process, Jeremy. And to get back to what I was saying about how it's easier now, I shouldn't say it's easier. You have an option now that I didn't have when I started. It used to be that if you've written a manuscript and you want people around the world to be able to buy it and read it, you need a publishing deal. You need to convince a publisher that this is something of value. You have to find an agent who has these connections to publishers and whose opinion is respected, because these publishers get so much material. They're always looking to have it represented to them. And then you kind of have to hold your breath and hope that somebody wants to publish your book. And it's a big waiting game. Now there's this wonderful option of self-publishing, at least for a while. You write a book, and maybe you send it out and no publisher bites, and you say, you know what, I think this is a great book, and I want to hold a copy in my hand, and I want my friends to be able to buy it, and I want to give it to my dad for Christmas, And so you just go to any number of different print-on-demand services and you design a cover with them and you print a book. And maybe you print 100 copies, or maybe you just print copies when they're ordered. But what happens then is you actually have convinced yourself that you can write a book. You're holding the artifact in your hand, you're gift wrapping it for your friends. And at that point, you might be inspired to write another book. And maybe this one's a little bit better because it's your second time around, and maybe a publisher picks it up. Or maybe, as often happens, your self-published book develops a following. And people start saying, wow, that book by Jeremy is terrific. And all of a sudden you've sold 500, 1,000, 5,000 copies on your own. And a publisher gives you a call and says, what's this book I'm hearing about? And in the meantime, you haven't waited 3 years. You've actually had a book out in the marketplace. So that's, I hope that's helpful. I'm not sure I answered your question, but that is the process.
No, you certainly did, because I've tried the self-publishing. I actually wrote a kid's book for my children and self-published it through Amazon. So what you're saying is very encouraging to keep going and keep trying and work towards more. So thank you for that.
Let me ask you, was the process of self-publishing inspirational and motivational to you when you finally held this book? Did you sort of think, maybe I'll do this again?
Absolutely. Yeah, having a physical copy in my hand that I had connections at a bookstore, so I was able to do a book signing, and that whole experience was
probably
with everything that I had expected. So it was good, but to hear the process to keep going and to take time and keep working at it, it certainly is encouraging to keep going.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Excellent. Yeah.
Thank you, Jeremy. We have a number of questions here. So Kaylee wants to know, how has the pandemic distorted some of those human connections you were talking about and changed things from your perspective?
Well, I mean, tonight's a perfect example. It's just different. We're connected. We're certainly connected, but it's in a much different way. We're not in each other's physical space. It's funny, the pandemic for authors, I think, is much more palatable than it is for certainly for teachers, for students, for business people who work in offices. I'm accustomed to living alone and working alone, and not having people in my space all day. I like to go out at night with friends or have friends over for dinner or whatever it is. But the problem with the pandemic is that just hasn't been possible for the majority of us. I think it has affected the topics I want to write about pretty dramatically. I'm writing now in a space that I didn't imagine I'd be writing about, and I think it's a function of a lot of solitude, and I'm guessing a lot of us are feeling that now. And whether we're writing novels or writing journals or even just talking to friends, there is a solitude that we all feel right now, and a disconnect. And with a little luck, it will. I think there's been some good that's come out of it too, right? I think a lot of us. I have a lot of friends who have reevaluated what they're doing with their lives, and have decided to pursue what they feel is more important, even if it's not more practical. So that's been a positive.
Great. I have a question here. Lily says, I note that the characters who come off as well-meaning but misguided are the ones who buy in 100% to either science or theology. Are you advocating a middle ground, perhaps?
Absolutely. I want to be able to, I create these characters to make arguments on both sides of the equation, partly to be fair and partly because it's interesting. And if you're talking about science and religion, for example, there are fantastic arguments that in favor of religion for what it does for cultures. And there is science to support that religious cultures historically have survived far longer and were more cooperative and actually better behaved for each other than cultures that did not have religion. But there's also science to say that, well, when religion is unchecked, you get the Crusades. And so that's not ideal either. And certainly science is the same thing, that, you know, mankind has never created a technology that we have not weaponized. Every single wonderful thing that we create, we find a way to weaponize it. I don't care whether it's nuclear power or fire or the wheel or the airfoil. I mean, all of this stuff, we have found a way to use it with force and violence. And that is that's a psychological flaw, that's a human flaw, and that's kind of the space that I'm writing in now.
Okay. Meredith wants to know if you've had a teacher that inspired you.
Well, all of my heroes are teachers. I grew up in New Hampshire. I'm assuming people knew that. I'm right in your neck of the woods. My dad was a teacher at Phillips Exeter Academy, and I grew up in a dormitory surrounded by teachers. All of my babysitters were from all over the world, and they were really intellectually curious, excited students, and you know, all the parents around me were teachers. So I grew up sort of thinking, well, learning is fun and learning is cool, and so when I set out to write a hero, you know, you just draw on your personal experience, and I didn't know anybody on SEAL Team 6 or any big spies. I knew teachers, and so Robert Langdon became a sort of a conglomerate of a lot of the teachers that inspired me, including my dad. So yeah, I've had a lot of teachers that have inspired me, and it's funny looking back, and I'm guessing it's true for everyone here. The teachers that were hardest on me are the ones that I ended up remembering the most. And I should tell you, my first English paper at Phillips Exeter Academy, this is kind of an embarrassing story. I was a 9th grader, and I had just that summer been on a rafting trip down the Colorado River. And our first paper was to write about an adventure we'd had. I thought, this is great. So I wrote a paper that I was absolutely positive was A+ work. And every single color and plant, I just described everything. And the paper came back to me. This was Jack Heath was the teacher's name. And he circled more than half of the adjectives and just wrote at the top, let's not overdo it. C-, by the way. C- was my first grade. So there's hope for everyone. But that is a lesson I remember, that there is a point of diminishing returns with description, that your brain can really only process so much before it just starts, you know, sounding like word salad. So.
Sure. Well, Katya wants to know if there's been a person or a place that you wanted access to for research and couldn't get it, such as the Vatican Archives, she suggests.
Well, such as the Vatican Archives is on that list. I have not been to the secret archives. I've been to the Vatican Archives, but very few people have been permitted in the Vatican Archives. At the time I was petitioning, I think it was only 2 Americans, and both were priests, and I just wasn't on their list of favorite people at that point. So I was not permitted. I'm trying to think. I mean, I was given access to the Barcelona Supercomputing Center, which was absolutely fascinating. I loved that. There have certainly been, you know, I've written about NSA and CIA and some of those places, and as a lot of writers do, you want access, and that doesn't
not happening. Fair enough. Well, Heidi seems to have done her research here, because she also wants to know if you could speak about the music piece that your brother wrote that inspired you to write Origin.
Wow, what a great question. So my brother, Gregory Brown, you know, also grew up without a television. I should mention my sister, Valerie Brown, also grew up without a television. And I went on to become a writer. My sister is a painter, and my brother is a professional musician. So, you know, we all ate a lot of macaroni and cheese for many years and have finally found our way, but we all decided to take that creative path. And Greg wrote this fascinating piece called the Charles Darwin, the Charles Darwin Mass. It's this beautiful polyphonic choral piece in the form of a mass, with the traditional movements of a Catholic Mass. And when you hear the music, it sounds sacred. It sounds like you should be hearing it in church. But when you listen to the lyric, it's not Sanctus, it's not Kyrie, it's not the traditional Latin Mass. It is the writings of Charles Darwin. And so you're listening to language that's talking about the survival of the fittest and how the weak will perish, but it's in this form that's this unbelievably sort of shocking juxtaposition. And that piece really got me thinking about religion's view of evolution. And the fact that the piece was so disconcerting, that juxtaposition was so disconcerting, really got me thinking in terms of origin of species, evolution, and where will evolution end up? And evolution has ended up with artificial intelligence. We have evolved to the point where we're building other intelligent life forms, for lack of a better word.
Wow, what amazing inspiration.
If you have not heard the Charles Darwin Mass, I'm sure it's on Spotify. Misa Charles Darwin, Gregory Brown. Even if you listen to 30 seconds of it, it's a pretty spectacular piece of music. And I was just in Berlin last year at his, there was a performance of it by New York Polyphony in the Berlin Museum of Natural History under the biggest brontosaurus skeleton in the world. And so we were, standing in the space with dinosaurs, listening to this music. It was pretty remarkable.
That's so cool. Wow. And so we have a question: who are your favorite authors and/or favorite books?
Wow, I have a lot of all of those. I should preface this by saying I read almost no fiction. I read almost exclusively nonfiction, primarily for research. The books that inspired me as a kid, and I know that this foundation deals specifically with kids' literacy. A Wrinkle in Time absolutely changed my life. And that book has a little romance, it has a little physics, it has a little magic, has some adventure, and I just remember when I finished it, I just wanted to read it all over again. And that was really the book that got me reading voraciously. And I read the Hardy Boys series from start to finish, and sort of took that path. And then what happened was what happened to probably all of us who went to high school and university, is that all of a sudden your reading list is all the classics. And so I spent 8 years reading, Beowulf and Chaucer and Shakespeare and Homer, and really read nothing other than that. And when I got out of college, just by chance, I found a copy of Sidney Sheldon's The Doomsday Conspiracy. I didn't know who Sidney Sheldon was. I'd never heard of this book. And I found it on a beach. It was a paperback, and I just started reading, and I was just entranced. I thought, what is this? This is like Hardy Boys for adults. And it was a thriller. I mean, it was just sort of a light thriller. And I remember reading it in a day or two and thinking, I wonder if I could do something like this. I wonder if I could write something like this. And that was really the first inkling I had that I might want to write. I feel like I've entirely missed your question. I don't know.
No, you didn't. And I will say that A Wrinkle in Time continues to be very popular in Cliff book giveaways. So I'm glad to see that has inspired some incredible writing. Martina
Absolutely.
wants to know how you came up with Robert Langdon's character.
Well, he's as I said, it's sort of a homogenation or a conglomerate of many different teachers that have inspired me. And I think for most authors, your hero is in my case is the guy I wish I could be. And most of us write the hero that has the traits that we respect, that we wish we had more of. Robert Langdon is a whole lot cooler and braver and smarter than I'll ever be. And that's why he's fun to write. He gets to do all the things that I don't really have the courage to do. And it's funny, I remember once at a talk, I had said, well, Robert Langdon is much smarter than me. And a woman raised her hand and said, well, how can that be true? Because everything that comes out of his mouth you had to write. I know, but when he just walks by painting the Louvre and on his way by glances over his shoulder and gives you a perfect description of what's happening in that painting, that took me 2 days to write. So there you have it.
Cool. Lily has 2 questions here. She wants to know, do you suggest trying for a series or starting with a standalone? She wants to know if publishers are interested in series more than standalone novels.
I think publishers are interested in quality. They're interested in books that make you think, books that make you want to turn the page. And I think that, as far as writing a series or writing a standalone, you really have to write. I mean, it's hard enough to write one book. If you're just starting out, maybe don't put the pressure on yourself to write 3 books. Write a single book, and if it's fantastic, maybe you have an idea to continue that character. And I should say that I didn't plan a Robert Langdon series at all. Not many people know this because in the front of the book, the titles are listed out of order with all the Robert Langdon books together. But I wrote Digital Fortress about the National Security Agency and computer encryption. And then I wrote Angels and Demons about the Vatican and religion. And after spending 3 years, going back and forth to Rome and living in the world of art, I said, I can't do any more of that. And I wrote Deception Point about glaciology, NASA, and extraterrestrial life. But I kind of missed, when I went to write a 4th book, I kind of missed Robert Langdon. I missed the world of symbols and codes and art. And I thought, oh, you know what? Maybe I should write another book with this character. And my guess is that my wonderful agent or editor might have helped me in that direction. I don't have a clear recollection, but it seems like something they would have helped me with. And so I did, and I wrote Da Vinci Code just as a follow-up to Angels and Demons, but it was never planned as a series. So to answer your question, I would write a standalone book. Don't put the pressure on yourself to think of a number of books. Write one, and if it works, write the sequel.
Lily also wanted to know if you had any input in choosing Tom Hanks as Robert Langdon. How do I say this? Who wouldn't want Tom Hanks to be the star of your movie? I mean, the greatest American living actor. I mean, just such a likable person. It's funny. I think the honest answer is no. I had nothing to do with that. It was such a pleasure working with Ron Howard. He always made me feel like I was part of the decisions. But he also knew me very well. I'm not the kind of guy who's going to tell Ron Howard how to cast a movie. And same with Tom Hanks. I'm not about to stop production and say, Tom, I don't like the way you're delivering that line. I was so fortunate to work with, some of the best talent in the industry, really good, hardworking people who understood the material and wanted to do it the way it should be done. And so I was more of a tourist on the movie set. They were very kind to ask me a bunch of questions and give me input that may or may not have had any effect on the movie. So that must have been fun. I just wants to know, do you find it difficult to balance time spent doing research and time spent during actual writing?
Yeah, I do actually, which is why I tend to do a lot of research in the beginning without writing. The thing about research is that there is this point when it becomes procrastination. And if you're writing a research intensive book, you need to know where that line is, where you're telling yourself, well, I can't possibly write this scene because I don't know how they make the dish that my hero is eating while he's having this conversation. You're like, you know what? Once you write the scene, and if you need to put in a tiny bit of flavor later when you figure out what he's eating, fine. But research can be so much fun, and the learning process can be so sort of compulsive or addictive, that you do need to know that maybe I don't need to know anything more about Sagrada Familia to write a murder scene in the stairwell. I probably don't need to know, the exact size of that pane of glass across the chapel. So,
Jenna asks, what, if anything, can you tell us about the book you're working on now?
I can tell you only one thing, and this is for people who know my books. It'll be a little surprising. This is a Robert Langdon book, and in all the books, Robert Langdon has always met a different woman in every book, a different love interest, and he's a very lucky guy. He always, in the first chapter or few chapters, stumbles into a particle physicist or a cryptologist or a beautiful Spanish princess or whoever it happens to be, who conveniently has the exact skill set that he requires to solve whatever his tragedy of the day is. In this book, it starts a little bit differently. Robert Langdon, when you meet Robert Langdon, he is actually in a 3-year relationship. So he's no longer a bachelor. He's been in a relationship a while. He's very much in love. And the woman with whom he is in love is a character from one of the previous novels.
Ooh.
So that's all I can tell you.
Intriguing. Great. Well, then perhaps the hardest hitting question: how does Winston the dog feel about his role in the book, and what naughty or ingenious thing did he do to inspire that role?
This is funny. That's a great question. In fact, I got the dog Winston after I finished the novel, and decided. And Winston's only 2 years old. He's a puppy, and I got him after I finished the novel, and I decided I wanted to name him Winston. I thought I might name him Langdon, and my assistant said Winston's much better, and I thought, oh my God, you're right, of course it is. So I named him Winston, and somebody said, why would you ever do that? Because in Origin, doesn't Winston come back and kill his master? I'm like, you're right. Yeah. So I have high hopes that Winston will be well behaved, but we'll see.
And this is a comment as opposed to a question, but Heidi says, thank you for always sending me off on internet searches to learn new things I had no idea were happening in the science world, or places I'd never heard of, or symbols I wasn't aware of. Your books are so much fun. And thank you, Cliff, for giving me an evening to actually dress up and put on makeup during COVID. This was great fun. Thank you, Heidi.
What a great comment.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions? Folks, feel free to put them in the chat or to raise your hand. Certainly plenty more we can discuss this evening. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about your journey with Wild Symphony, and how the response has been, or how it's been, publishing a book during COVID era, or anything related to that.
Yeah, publishing during COVID has been interesting. In the case of this particular book, there was I think it was a 32 city concert tour, a symphony orchestra concert tour set up around the world to launch this book. And of course, with COVID, that didn't happen. So that was disappointing. But something else happened that was really fascinating. That is, this book is so interactive, especially for parents and kids and teachers and kids, that publishing it in COVID time, I just realized the timing couldn't be more perfect. This is something that people need right now, is a way to interact, and parents and teachers are looking for things to do with young people that are fun and also educational. And that really is what Wild Symphony is. It's a lot of fun, but it has a moral aspect to it, some ethical lessons along the way, and the music. The music is a lot of fun, and the kids I've seen playing it are all dancing to it or pretending they're the animal. So COVID has it's been interesting, and in a strange way, I'm kind of glad that it came out now. It's been very, very well received around the world. It's I think in 30 something countries right now, languages rather, and it's been fun to see the poetry in Hungarian and have no idea if anything rhymes, and you just hope that you've had a wonderful translator. But I should tell you, I have a copy of the book here. I don't know if anybody's seen it, but you see how colorful the illustrations are. I had never worked with an illustrator. And when Random House said, we're going to need to get an illustrator, who do you like? I said, I have no idea. I mean, Dr. Seuss is gone. Other than that, I have no idea. And they said, so we're going to pull together 100 different samples of artists and you can tell us who you like. Just whittle it down. And I went to New York, and on their huge boardroom table were all these stacks of different artists, no names. And I sort of went through all of them and ended up with 4 stacks. I said, I like these 4 artists. And they laughed and they said, that's really funny. You have chosen 3 of the best known children's book authors on earth and 1 total unknown. And I said, I hope the unknown is not the woman, it's not the artist who makes the alligators with the googly eyes, because that's my favorite. And I said, yeah, her name's Susan Battery. And you know, she's done some books, but she's not as well known as these others. And I said, wow, I just love her. And they agreed. And she just did the most wonderful job. And I have such fond memories of when we were recording all of the music. We recorded it in Croatia with the Zagreb Festival Orchestra in a giant hall, a symphony hall. So Susan Battery and I, the artist, we were all alone, just sort of sitting in the middle of this huge hall. And she had a sketch pad while we were recording and was just listening to Wondrous Whale and drawing a whale and just sort of trying to get a feel for the music. And I have no aptitude for art. I know a lot about art and I study art, but I'm not skilled at it in the least. And so I just watched in awe as she just very quickly created these fantastic drawings. It was a lot of fun.
Wow. And I do have a librarian here who says that she just ordered Wild Symphony for her elementary school library. Our music teacher and I are hoping to co-teach a unit based on the book and the accompanying music. So very cool.
Excellent. Yeah, and the music, by the way, is absolutely free. So we built I mean, it's on Spotify and Apple Music and all that, but there's also an app that goes with the book where you can play the music absolutely free. And that was important to me to make sure that everybody could enjoy it.
It's wonderful. Jeremy wants to know, how do you go about naming your characters? As simple as it may seem, there always seems to be a small wrench that burdens my creative process. Do you have any insight on this?
I always name them after my ex-teachers. So my prep school Italian teacher, Aldo Baja, was a cardinal in Angels and Demons, and he was drowned in the Fountain of the Four Rivers. And he thought that was absolutely hilarious. He called me after the book came out and said, you know, I didn't give you that bad a grade. You shouldn't have drowned me in the river. But most of my characters are named after people I know. And so, Jeremy, that's a great place to start. That you just change the name slightly, and it also will help in the writing process. If you talk about Deception Point, President Zach Herney is actually named him Zach Herney, but it's after Jack Herney, who was and is a teacher at Phillips Exeter that I always thought was very presidential. And so as I was writing the president, I was imagining this man, and it helped me write him. And rather than calling him Jack, I called him Zach to give him a little bit of privacy. But that's always a great trip to name characters after people who are kind of similar to what you're writing.
Cool. And Meredith says she thought what was intriguing was the codes and puzzle. How do you come up with those for kids and adults? So kind of codes and puzzles and mysteries. Yeah.
So I talked about growing up without a TV. I also had a very strange Christmas morning ritual, which was, would come down to the Christmas tree and the presents weren't there. There was just a clue, and it would be a short poem. My dad was a great poet. A short poem that would, if you decipher it, it would send you off to the kitchen, and where you find another poem in the refrigerator, which would send you out to the wood pile. And you'd follow a treasure hunt, really, of little riddles. Until finally it would show you where your Christmas presents were. So that was my Christmas morning. And so codes and treasure hunts were always such fun to me. I studied music, which is a symbolic language. It's a code of sorts. I studied a lot of math, which is a symbolic language and codes. I think we all love that eureka moment that we get with, whether it's a jigsaw puzzle or a crossword puzzle, or even just, there's a reason Jeopardy's still on television. People like going like, I know that. So that's really, that's one of my great joys, is that eureka moment. And so I try to put them in everything I do. And ideally, if you're writing a novel that has some sort of puzzle in it, the reader might figure it out a sentence or two before your hero, and if not, certainly instantly when the hero reveals it, they'll realize, of course, it was right in front of me the whole time. And there were a couple of those in Origin. In Wild Symphony, there are many different levels of codes. For the youngest kids, there's a little bee, a tiny little bumblebee that's hidden on every page, and it's in some funny place in every single picture. And I've seen little kids, they don't care about the poems, they don't care about anything. They just want to find the bee. That's their game. And also, if you look closely, every page has letters hidden in the grass and in the trees and underwater. And if you collect the letters on the page and put them in the proper order, they will spell one of the instruments. They'll spell one of the instruments in an orchestra. And that was a way to sort of have some fun and teach kids the instruments in orchestra. And that there's a key. The end papers are all the orchestra instruments, so the kids can read. There's some codes, and there are codes in there that people have not yet seen or solved. And I should say that I don't know if anyone on this call knew my mom, Connie Brown, who passed away a few years ago. But she was the one who gave me my love of music. And on the first page of this, there is a staff of music. And on the staff, if you read music, you'll see 3 notes, and they are a C, a G, and a B. And she was Constance Gerhard Brown, and that is a little code, a musical code tribute to my mom. And there's stuff like that throughout the whole book.
So cool. That's wonderful. So I have one comment here about the book. It is a wonderful book. I've purchased 2 copies from my local bookstore. Many thanks for such a unique book for a 4-year-old and a soon-to-be graduate of college, both of whom will enjoy and treasure their copy for very different reasons in days to come. Many thanks, Dan Brown. Thank you for that, Jane. And I think we have a few more questions here. Oh no, just folks saying they're sending the book to their nieces, thanking you, yeah, several other just accolades. So thank you very much, Dan. Do we have other questions or things folks wanted to talk about this evening? Oh, we have one from Katya, I believe. Here we go. Take it away, Katya.
I just wanted to say, I also grew up thinking classical music was the only music around. So I feel you on that. And I just love that Wild Symphony is really introducing classical music and the sounds of the orchestra to a new young generation, much like Benjamin Britten did and Peter and the Wolf, which I loved growing up. And it just took me back to like my childhood days for that. So thank you.
I'm very glad. And of course, Carnival of the Animals and Peter and the Wolf were big influences on me as a kid too.
Now we have Charlie. Go ahead, Charlie.
Hi, Dan. I just want to say, first of all, your books, reading your books have helped me get through some pretty bad times over the past few months. So thanks for that. And my question to you is, in 2 days' time, obviously, it's Valentine's Day. So what's your favorite love story?
My favorite love story, my gut is Much Ado About Nothing. I know people are going to say Romeo and Juliet. Much Ado About Nothing touched me just because of the humor. Let me think. Favorite love story. This is kind of a cheesy answer, but Bridges of Madison County or The English Patient are 2 fantastic love stories.
Thank you.
We have one question here. What is the intended age group for Wild Symphony?
Well, it's funny. They say it's 4 through 8, I think, something like that. But I hear that they're rethinking that because there's something in there for everyone, and we all enjoy listening to music. Maybe it's because kids can't write email, but I get a lot of email from parents saying how much they're enjoying the book. And that they actually, have shared it with older kids. A couple of kids got it as graduation presents, from college, saying there's a lot of life lessons in here. So I'm not sure. I intended it for young children, but I guess maybe it's for the young at heart. We'll just put it that way. Whatever your age is, if you're young at heart, you'll probably enjoy it.
I like that. Do we have any other questions or comments folks want to share this evening? Feel free to either raise your hand or put it in the chat. Going. Well, Dan, we've really enjoyed this evening with you. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. And thank you for your work. I know it's meant a lot to many of the readers here this evening. So I know we very much appreciate it. Oh, we have one more question. What is your favorite book of your own?
Oh, wow. I mean, it is sort of like, I mean, if you ask an author, he'll always say whatever the last book he finished, just because it's so good to finish a book. By the time you're at the end, but it is a little bit like asking parents who their favorite child is. And as one parent told me, we all have a favorite, but we never admit it. So I will never admit it. I love all my books equally.
Wonderful. So do we. Thank you so much. And we have another Ivana saying hello from Mexico. I'm really excited to be here. Although I don't speak 100% English, thank you for creating a space like this. I admire you a lot and I look forward to your next book. So
wow.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ivana.
Thank you. Gracias.
Well, Dan, we so greatly appreciate you spending your Friday evening with us and all of your work. We thank everyone for joining us this evening. Please do, if you haven't had a chance, check out Wild Symphony, and we all look forward to your next book, Dan.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to everybody, and I guess good night.
Have a wonderful evening. Thank you all.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.